So hello everyone, thank you so much for coming to join us for this week's Webinar Wednesday. As some of you might know, my name is Stephanie Fox from the Network One and I will be moderating this webinar. We have the rest of the team on the call, so we have Julian Boulding, Paul Squirrel and Lizzie Gold, and if you need any help with anything, they are on hand to help you out. So just a quick bit of housekeeping before I introduce our speakers. We will now have a 5-minute introduction by me. We have 2 speakers today. They'll speak for 35 minutes and they'll give a presentation. We will then say 15 minutes at the end for Q&A, and we'll aim to finish by 1:55 London time, so you can be ready for your next virtual appointment. So we've muted your microphones. Please keep them muted at all times so we don't have the background noise. If we're calling you to ask a question, we'll unmute your microphone. That being said, we would appreciate it if you could keep your videos on so our speakers have some friendly faces to present to. As I mentioned, we'll have a Q&A portion at the end, but if you have any questions in the meantime, please send them to me directly in the chat. So to do this, just go to your chat box and where it says to, you should see a drop-down menu. So instead of everyone, just select Stephanie Fox. We will go through all of the questions and we'll select a few to ask our speakers once they've finished speaking. So all of the questions should be sent directly to me in the chat box, but if you would like to ask a question yourself, please type "I'll ask." If you prefer for me to ask the question for you, that's fine, but please say so. Hopefully you'll have your Zoom viewing mode set to speaker view. If not, just click speaker view at the top right of your screen. Our speakers will be sharing slides on their screens. So if you can't see their speaker windows when their slides are on the screen, you can just select show active speaker video. If you have any technical issues, please message Lizzie Gold directly in the chat, or you can email Lizzie at lizzi.gold@thenetworkone.com. We're currently recording this webinar, so there is no need to take notes if you prefer not to. And finally, if the whole system crashes for any unlikely reason, please just wait a couple of minutes and log back in with the same link that you already used to log in this afternoon. Thanks very much. Now I am very pleased to introduce our speakers, Maxine Fox and Sadie Buckingham of Giraffe Insights. So as Managing Director at Giraffe Insights, Maxine Fox leads a dedicated team working across a number of disciplines. With over a decade working in research, she has become an industry-recognized specialist in speaking to kids, young people, and families to elicit the greatest insights for brands. Sadie Buckingham, Insight Director at Giraffe Media, has extensive experience of working across many different sectors, conducting research both within the UK and internationally. As a leader in quantitative approaches and analysis, Sadie manages projects throughout their entire life cycle, providing brands with the assurance that budgets are being spent in the right areas and that strategies are informed rather than predicted. In today's webinar, Maxine and Sadie will be sharing their latest insights from their international media viewing study, speaking to 3,500 kids and parents across 9 markets. So without further ado, I will now turn over to our speakers.
Great, thank you. Hello everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Maxine Fox, so we'll do some quick introductions before we sort of delve into the presentation. My name is Maxine Fox and I head up Giraffe Insights. So we are a kids, youth and family specialist research agency conducting research in the UK and across international markets as well. In terms of my sort of career and a bit of background, so I actually started off in something very different, always been in market research, but started off in pharmaceutical research and healthcare across international markets, then moving into more sort of media focused research, working for some time at the BBC, and most recently, of course, heading up a team at Giraffe Insights for over 6.5 years now. So I have my colleague on the call with me too, so I'll hand over to Sadie to do a quick introduction.
Hi, I'm Sadie Buckingham. I'm Insight Director at Giraffe. I've been in the industry for over 10 years. I started actually in FMCG and food and drink, and then I moved into innovation and then moved to Giraffe. And I actually head up the quantitative elements within Giraffe, and I started these stakeholder projects that we're going to be sharing the insights with you today. So super excited to be able to share with you.
Okay, I will just share my screen now and get the presentation up. Brilliant. So we will be talking today about how kids are a really important audience because they actually inspire parents and other sort of purchasers around them, and specifically looking at, based on them being an important audience, how you can reach them most effectively. So we've already done a quick introduction, but just to let you know that it will be myself and Sadie taking you on this journey through this presentation today. I will just be here at the start and the end. It will mainly be Sadie sharing the insights with you as we go through. But to start off with then, just to let you know who we are and what we do, to build a bit of context. So as I say, we're kids, youth and family research specialists, but that by no means that we only speak to kids. So we obviously do a lot of work with adults too, and parents, gift givers and other influencers within that space. And our business sort of takes on two strands. So the first is bespoke research that actually goes towards answering individual client needs. So when you have a specific business question, we can put together a tailored approach and how you can best answer that. So that's using different tools and approaches, so qualitative approaches and quantitative approaches too. So anything from your sort of large scale online surveys, reporting through a dashboard, through to ethnographies or more traditional sort of qualitative methods like interviews and focus groups. But then the other strand to our business and the studies that we'll be showing you today are our syndicated studies. And these are actually born from questions that we get asked time and time again by our clients that go unanswered, really. So we launched these studies to answer these questions for multiple different people so that they can all access the results. So there's 3 studies at the moment that we run. The first is Little Voices, which is a study which speaks to kids and parents every other month. And gains regular sort of insights from them across all different areas of their lives. And the 2 that we're going to focus on in today's session is the Kids in the Screen Changing the Channel research, which is UK specific, but launching in other markets next year, and a very recent piece of international research that we have conducted over last month. So this is sort of really sort of latest insights. In terms of why you're here today, there's 3 sort of reasons. The first is in terms of keeping up with the speed of change. So things are obviously always changing and we're identifying new trends. But what we've seen is, unsurprisingly, with everything going on around us at the moment in the environment, and dare I say the dreaded C word, but with COVID and since COVID, we've actually seen a lot of these behaviours and trends that we've identified pre-COVID accelerating. So it's really important, more now than ever, to be keeping on top of what's going on and the trends and how these behaviours are changing. Not only that, but there are certainly some gaps in knowledge. So as I said, the research studies that we've launched and the insights that we'll be showing you today are where we've identified that there aren't already these answers out there, and particularly when it comes to looking at other markets. So with our Kids in the Screen Changing the Channel piece, we have a breadth of knowledge within the UK in terms of how kids consume content, but there's a real gap actually across other markets. So what we've started to do is to build this picture out more internationally, starting with some of the European markets that we'll touch on today. So what's to come? So the first sort of section will look at why kids are important, why they're sort of a valuable audience and shouldn't be ignored. We'll then actually move on to look at how you can effectively reach and engage them. And finally, how best to utilise the touch points that we identify within your sort of media toolkit. So the 2 studies that the insights will focus on today, as I say, are our Kids in the Screen Changing the Channel research. So this is conducted within the UK only and has been running for 4 years now. Now, this is quite an extensive study that we run, and it speaks to 2,000 kids aged 2 to 12, and it speaks to them at 2 points in the year, and that's in the sort of the Easter time and also the October half-term time as well. But what we do is we cover off weekdays, weekends, term times, holiday times, so that we can really provide the complete picture of video consumption for kids aged 2 to 12. So that's our Kids in the Screen Changing the Channel piece. And as I said, what we wanted to do was really start to understand how this plays out in other markets too, starting with some of the European markets. So the study on the left-hand side there is one that we've conducted very recently across 9 different European markets. So the UK, Belgium, Czech, France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Poland, and Spain. And this speaks to children aged 1 to 12 years old and their parents too. And it looks at not only their media behaviours, but also inspiration points and what this means for parents. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Sadie, who can start off by sort of telling you about why kids are important.
Thanks, Maxine. So the first section is going to be around a couple of insights around why kids are really important and can be utilised as a persuasive tool for parents. In the global study, we actually asked the kids, if you really want something, how likely are you to get it? And actually 61% of those kids say that they almost always get what it is that they want. And for us, it just shows that they are this powerful force, if you like, in terms of that pester power. We also asked parents as well. So 70% of parents actually buy products their children have asked for, and 62% of parents buy products that the children have seen on TV. So we're seeing both sides in terms of kids having that power, parents being influenced, but parents are also influenced by that the adverts shown on TV as well. And we cover this in the next section in terms of we have to consider the types of platforms that we utilize, which can both engage the parent and the child. But ultimately, we know that kids are a persuasive audience and they shouldn't be forgotten because they can be utilised as a tool, if you like, in terms of a communication strategy. But how is it that we can effectively reach and engage this audience? So we know that kids have a myriad of ways in which they're accessing content, but for us, this actually creates opportunity because it's also a multiple touch points in which we can reach and engage. But what we have to think about on top of this is the ways in which we utilize these touch points to be able to be most effective in the way that we talk and the type of communications that we utilize. Because we also know as well that actually the way in which kids are accessing content is actually changing and shifting quite rapidly. What we're showing you here is UK based, but it's actually based on over 90,000 occasions and also over the course of 3 years. And we can see the pattern or the trend, if you like, in terms of linear TV declining or on its way to decline. And actually that journey, if you like, of SVOD or subscription on demand and the increase that we're seeing over the last few years, but particularly in this last little year, if you like, it really is starting to increase. And these kids are adopting these more digital behaviours in terms of how they're accessing content. But it's not quite as simple as that, in that we also know that this adoption of digital content is actually evolving at a different rate. And this is really important to understand as well in terms of where we know our individual markets are on this scale. There are definitely some which have adopted the digital, very much immersed in that digital life. The UK is one of them in terms of overall on that digital side, but then there are still the markets which are very much still firmly within the traditional and within that linear. And this has a big implication in terms of how we create the strategies and talk and engage with children in these markets. And we need to be aware of where each of these markets sit on this particular scale. And there's big implications as well in terms of this shift towards the digital inspiration. And if we take linear versus online first, we know that linear is on the decline at differing rates across the different markets, but this is a pattern that we're seeing. And with that comes its own implication in that we before had linear and live TV, which was very good for that kind of large reaching audience, but we know that this is now declining, and it means that our impacts are declining as well. But we can utilize YouTube and online as a extra sort of element, if you like, to be able to target them. But there's an issue with utilizing YouTube in that we can't guarantee the target audience that is sat behind that sort of tablet, if you like we could with linear TV. It comes with its own implication. With linear TV, we know where they are, we know who's watching, we know what they're watching, and we know the traditional comms as well in terms of the adverts that work well on that platform. They're those longer adverts, and we've worked very hard to be able to optimize those, and they work very well in terms of engaging our target audiences in the way that we want, which is to purchase that brand or that product and persuade the child to ask for the toy. But then if we look at the on demand on this right hand side, and we've got the subscription. So we know that Netflix is increasing, but actually Netflix isn't accessible commercial time for us. So even though they're moving on to this platform, it's not something that we can use to communicate. But there are other platforms available. So the AVOD, for example, where we are able to show that commercial time and show those commercial adverts are available, but we know that they also make up a small proportion of that overall viewing. And we need to keep all of these in mind to be able to utilize them for our strategies. And what it comes down to, and this is a really important point as well, is that at Giraffe, we're very sort of focused on the myth busting as well. That is why we've developed some of the strategies and some of the stakeholder projects that we have developed, is that quite often there are these conversations and these myths, and we talk about what we think kids are doing. And a couple of years ago especially, there was a lot of conversation around all kids are going onto YouTube and all kids are going to online. So at that point, quite a few of the brands actually started to shift all of their stuff onto online, because that's what we thought kids were doing. But actually we need to look at the facts, and we need to look at what kids are actually doing to be able to ensure that the strategies that we're implementing are still as effective as they can be. Because even if we think about the UK, which we know is at that farther end of the digital sort of shift, we actually, with the kids in the screen research, were able to capture the proportion of adverts that are recalled every single time they watch a piece of content. And what we can see, even in the UK, is that half of the adverts that they recall is still being seen on a linear channel and on live TV. So for the UK, even though it's digitally focused, live TV at this moment in time is still the most effective way we can reach and engage with this target audience. And it's not just that either. In terms of mindset, we did ask the kids, where do you see the adverts that give you the inspiration for gifts and presents that you ask for? And actually the majority of the market are still in that more traditional mindset, and they still see those most inspirational adverts on the TV. But that makes sense as well, in terms of, we know that they're watching more TV at this moment in time, and we have got a tried process in terms of the adverts that we're delivering on that platform too. So the inspiration is still very much traditional, but we do need to think about all of these touch points, online, traditional, to be able to come up with an effective approach, which actually more holistic and brings out the benefits of all of these platforms. And we come on to say how to do that in the next section. So how is it that we utilize our media touch points? First of all, we start off with the needs, and this is always where we start at Giraffe. We need to know why it is that kids are making these decisions, and that ultimately helps us to plan and project, if you like, in terms of what's going to happen in the future. And in terms of viewing needs, these are actually ones that came out more in the lockdown period, because kids in the screen we were able to capture before lockdown, during lockdown, and we've just finished some research after lockdown, we're actually able to see what's changed, but also the types of needs that have evolved and actually stuck around and are going to become more important for viewing and our strategies moving forwards. And this is what we see here. So in the morning, actually needs of viewing are around that solo viewing. They need little supervision, and it starts to shift in that early afternoon. And actually the key needs revolve more around new content. New content, it should be like really good content, but also these moments tapping into the family time as well. And the platforms that they actually have access to are tapping into these specific needs. So live TV does tap into that early morning solo viewing with little supervision. It is a safe place for them to go and watch on their own. Then it shifts more to online, and it's more online is more about their interests and their hobbies. They go on and access content that is just specific for them, and YouTube and YouTube Kids enables them to do that. And then in the afternoon, it moves more onto the on-demand platforms, and this is your new content, your binge watching content, and ultimately content that they can tap into and watch with their family as well. But we need to consider these needs, and it's around the type of content and the device that they're using actually has a really big impact in terms of how we can effectively deliver the right communication in the right way. We know that the majority of time spent viewing is on the large screen, and it might come as a surprise in terms of the figures that we're showing here, because often with the talk in the industry is that everybody's moving to those mobile devices. But in the couple of screens that we showed before, we also showed you that increase of the on-demand platforms, and actually kids want to watch that brilliant content, that new content in a big screen, like really get the value out of it. So we're actually seeing big screen device going up and not down. So they're watching it on the big screen, but also they're watching different content on those different screens as well. And this is really important because on the big screen, they're watching that on demand and they're watching live TV. And on the little screen, it's actually online that they're watching, and that individual interest and hobby stuff that they're watching on YouTube, which makes sense again. So the kind of the big content versus the smaller content on either of those devices. On live TV, actually the top content that they're watching, I've just mentioned, is more that longer form content. So it's more to do with cartoons, animated, it's a preschool content and kids learning. But what that actually means is the adverts that they're recalling is very much linked to the type of content that they're watching on that big screen device and on those linear channels. It is more to do with those toy brands that coming through is what they've been connected to watching. And for YouTube, the content that they're watching is very different. It's more linked to the interests and the hobbies. So it's more likely to be vloggers, more likely to be video games, very much personal to them. And what we see with the adverts that they are recalling is that actually the brands also reflect the content that they're watching, and is more to do with media and technology and gaming. And it's just a really interesting perspective in that they are watching those two different platforms, and then it is that kind of, those adverts are the ones that are resonating the most, because ultimately when we ask kids, where do you get your biggest inspiration from for your toys, both TV adverts and online are important, and we do need to utilize both of them in these different ways to be able to effectively kind of create this holistic communication to increase that engagement. And this is all to help us place that right advert in the right way and at the right time. So for live TV, it should be that long form format. We know that it works really well. It's tried and tested, and it does work within this audience and for the categories that we generally show these longer form adverts for. We know as well on live TV that that message is getting through to the right person at the end. We're able to know who those kids are, where they're going to be, and what they're going to be watching. And also one of the benefits as well from a kind of a longer form, but also adverts which show lots of different benefits within that, can actually appease the needs of both the child and the parent as well. So it could be fun and exciting for the child, but also for the parent, they can see that actually that's potentially toys that enable their child to be entertained for longer, or has the benefits, for example, of being able to be part of that family play. And with online, we actually need to start thinking about the types of communications that we're placing on there in a different way. So they should be more short form, but importantly, content driven. So the content that they're watching and then remembering, it needs to be linked in that way. We need to build on the engagement that these kids have with the brand through character narrative. So we're building on the stories, building on the characters, and just adding to the overall story that they get, so that it's not just seen as an advert, but actually it's building the engagement that they have with the brand overall. So two different ways for us to be able to tailor our communications and really make the most of the different touch points that are available to us. But ultimately, the weight that we put on both of these, the traditional and the digital, and those different methods around the different types of communication that we place, does depend on where our markets are on this scale, in terms of, are they still more linear or are they more digital? And it's really important for brands to understand where they are, so that they can tailor and weight that communication to be able to make the most of the touch points available.
Thanks, Sadie. So what are some of the key things then that we actually want you to take away with you today? Well, the first is that it's really important to understand that kids are an influencing audience, and that whilst they might not be the ones reaching into their pockets to actually spend, they do have a big influence on those that do. So they shouldn't be forgotten about, and they do need attention paid to them when you're thinking about engaging them and targeting them in the right way. The next point to make is that it's really important to know your market. So whilst we absolutely see global trends and trends that exist across all different markets when it comes to the way kids consume content and where they get their inspiration from, certainly on that scale of where the markets sit from linear to digital, there are differences, which means the weight that you put to the linear versus the digital needs to be tailored to a specific market. And we haven't really touched on this today, but this also goes for the messaging and the communications as well that you have in each market. They also need to be tailored. There's no sort of one size fits all approach. And then evidence versus prediction. So as Sadie touched on, a lot of what we do is sort of myth busting. And a lot of the clients that we work with have hypotheses, they have predictions about what they think is going on. But what's really important is that you have research and insight to underpin those hypotheses and to build an evidence base to make sure that the decisions that you're making are the right ones, and that money is being spent in the most effective way. So thank you very much. We hope you found those insights useful. As I say, it'd be great to speak to anybody who's joined us today, and anyone who wasn't able to join us today but watches this later. If you've got any specific sort of business questions that you'd like to know if research can help, then absolutely get in touch. And if you'd like to know more about any of those syndicated studies that we run, including the two that we've given you some sort of taster insights for today, then again, please just reach out and get in touch with either myself or Sadie.
Amazing, thank you so much. We've had quite a few questions in, so I will put those to you now. Hold on, I might ask you to stop sharing your screen if you have a moment. Thank you.
Okay.
Quite perfect. All right, so some of the questions. So someone has asked, how do you deal with ethical and privacy issues about observing and talking to children?
Yes, we always get this question. So when it comes to children, they always get recruited and spoken to through the parent first. So any consent that we get originally starts off at the parent, and then from there goes through to the child.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, another question. Someone has said, do you see significant differences between the behavior of children and parents across different countries?
Yeah, so we absolutely do. So I think what's important, and that sort of last point that we were trying to make, was that we see global trends in terms of there is this shift amongst kids in terms of the ways that they're viewing and how they're viewing in a multitude of ways. But the weight that is attributed to the different ways that they can view differs across markets. So where you've got those more traditional markets, whilst they're still using digital and online to consume content, they may actually still be using linear TV more so and supplementing with a bit of digital and online alongside. But with markets like the UK and Czech, actually what we see is that online and on-demand viewing is actually starting to rival that of live TV. And it's sort of a much bigger marketplace there, and one that needs to be considered. In terms of parents, yes, there are differences again across markets. Whilst we know that kids have a persuasive sort of voice across all markets, actually the sort of the weight of that can slightly differ across the different markets. And the way as well that parents sort of find out information themselves for purchase can change as well. So we know in Germany, for instance, there's a lot of online search that goes on, and looking and researching products online once parents are aware of them is something that they do a lot of.
That's really helpful, thank you. So another question, are kids multitasking like adults and teenagers do? As in, do they watch two screens at the same time?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So within our Kids in the Screen research, because it's a quantitative study, but it's quite a qualitative approach in terms of they fill out a diary around each and every piece of content that they view. One of the questions within that one viewing occasion that we ask them is, were you doing anything else at the same time? So often for the younger kids, they can be playing with toys, and they will actually match the toy to the content that they're watching, and play with the toys at the same time.
That's so cute.
For those very young ones, they're obviously not doing what teenagers are doing in terms of being on social media at the same time as watching content, but they are often doing other things. One of the biggest one that actually comes through that they're doing is eating at the same time.
Makes sense. So we've had another question. Someone said, when do kids typically move from the large screen to the mobile device? At what kind of age?
So you'd be surprised, it's actually very young. So even our preschool audience are using devices. Now, this isn't to say that they own their own devices. And again, device access does differ by market. But for a very, very young age, even the preschool age, we see that they are using mobile devices. So it won't be their own device that they own. It will often be mum's device or dad's device that the preschoolers are using. But that will depend on the circumstance and the need behind why they're viewing the content in the first place. So for instance, where you saw some of that online viewing where they need to potentially keep them busy, then it will be that they get the sort of the mobile device, or when they're on the go, for instance. But when they're having that real family time, and often when they're viewing on demand, we can see through, you know, Netflix and Disney Plus and subscription video on demand platforms like that, it tends to be the big screen. But in terms of using small devices, preschoolers are absolutely doing it, and they can navigate themselves as well.
And just to clarify for international audience, preschool is which age range?
Yes, so it's up to 4 years old.
Wow, very young.
Yes.
So another question from the audience. Are you picking up usage among kids of new channels like TikTok?
So we do, within our one that we haven't touched on today is our Little Voices survey. So we didn't share the insights from that today, but within that, yes, we do cover social networking, social media sites, and those outside of just YouTube, such as TikTok, for instance, and Twitch.
Brilliant, thank you. And another question, how does usage change seasonally? So, for example, with lockdowns or term time versus school holiday or half term?
Yeah.
And as a second part of that question, should advertisers take this into account when scheduling advertising?
So certainly with the lockdown versus non-lockdown, yes, absolutely, which is why it's really important that you have up-to-date data and insights that you can use to plan, because as I say, we did see some real accelerations in behaviours, and behaviours changed during lockdown. So of course, with the routine and parents not necessarily going out to the office. For those periods in that first lockdown in the UK, we saw kids not going to school either. There was a lot more content being consumed. And we saw that what was really filling that space was subscription video on demand platforms, particularly with the introduction of new platforms such as Disney Plus. So yes, absolutely, lockdown versus non-lockdown, you need to know what's going on because there are changes that are happening. In terms of what we see with sort of term time, non-term time, weekday, weekends, it tends to be a similar pattern because the needs are the same. But what we obviously see is that actually the level of consumption increases. So whilst they'll be using the same platforms, they'll often be accessing similar types of content, actually that tends to increase on a weekend or during a holiday. So there's just more of it.
Perfect, thanks so much. So I actually think that's just about what we've got time for. I'm just going to see if there are any other questions. No, I think I think that's probably just about all we've got time for right now. So I'm going to share your details on the screen again. So if anyone didn't have time to answer your questions, you can contact our speakers at their email addresses that are on the screen now. So that's maxine.fox@giraffeinsights.co.uk or sadie.buckingham@giraffeinsights.co.uk. So I just want to give a really big thank you to Maxine and Sadie. That was an excellent webinar. You answered all our questions really comprehensively and you gave us a lot of food for thought as well. So you can also find out more about Giraffe Insights on their website, which is www.giraffeinsights.co.uk. And please do feel free to reach out to Maxine or Sadie if you have any further questions. Thank you guys all for coming. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll be holding webinars at the same time every Wednesday. So the next one will be held on the 9th of December and it will be on the subject of sound. So we often focus on the visual elements of creative work, but in many cases, sound is equally important, especially as more and more of us digest communication through digital channels. At next week's webinar, we'll be hearing from Tiziano Lamberti, composer and founder of SoundZone, about how choosing the right music can make a huge difference to a piece of creative work. Tiziano will be joined by Ella Duda, International Strategy Director of Siziem Son, a specialist agency that helps clients and other agencies develop and realize the huge commercial value of creating their own specific sound branding. So then after that, on the 16th of December, we're holding the last webinar of 2020. So as it is the last webinar, we'll be taking the opportunity to look back at what we've learned during this very unique year. And we'll also be looking forward to 2021. So watch this space. We will be releasing more details about that soon. And we will let you know when you can register for both of those webinars. So all of the future webinar Wednesdays can be found on our website under events at www.thenetwork1.com/webinars. And you can also see other recordings of previous webinars that we've done there as well. So again, huge thank yous to our speakers. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for joining and look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.